Hi there, and welcome to the Multiply You podcast, where we showcase top experts in their space and reveal all the secrets you need to know to multiply you. Hey, happy Tuesday, everybody. My name's Austin Clark. I'm the host of the Multiply You podcast, and here on the show, what I do is I interview top experts in their space. Today is absolutely no exception. Very, very excited to be able to introduce our guest in just a moment. And I think everyone will want to pay very careful and close attention to some of the things that are shared and stories that are shared and things that are said. It'll provide a tremendous amount of value. This message and this episode is brought to you by Moxie Pest Control. We are growing like crazy in Phoenix, nationally, really in all of our markets. We do that all of the same ways that you do: traditional marketing, direct sales, SEO, PPC, you name it. And most recently, the last 3 or 4 years, we've really gained a competency in acquisitions. And so I know for a fact there's over, just in Arizona, 1,200 registered pest control companies. And every week I'm able to have conversations with many that own those companies that are thinking about exiting. What does the next step look like? How can I monetize on all of this work that I've put in the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades? And so if you are one of those people listening, or if you know of anybody, have them reach out to me. They can contact me directly on my cell, call, or text. Text is usually better. And that's 480-254-9730. The man of the show for this episode, no doubt, Al Levi, author, speaker, consultant, entrepreneur. Al Levi is a success story like no other. Retiring before age 50, Al Levi began sharing his 7-power contractor systems, helping other contractors throughout the US, Canada, and Australia know more success and less stress in their businesses. Contractors can access Al through his book, online, one-of-a-kind operations manual program, and his long-running column in Plumbing and Mechanical magazine, and now in PHC News. For more info and contact information, you can reach out to Al at 7powercontractor.com. That's the number 7powercontractor.com, or visit 7powercontractor.com, and you can find tons of information. Al, thank you for being on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be talking to a fellow Arizonan. And so, yes. And for all of you out there who are cold and freezing, like I spoke to somebody in Minnesota today, sorry.
That's exactly right. You know, one of the only times it's good to be in Arizona, an Arizonan, is pretty much now through February or March. No one else is jealous of us during those other months.
Yeah, I used to live in Paradise Valley, and when I would go through TSA, they'd look at it and go, "Is it really paradise?" I go, 8 months a year it is.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the first time, I'm 37, the first time I shoveled snow in my life, I think I was 27. And I only needed to do that one time in my life to know I'm not equipped for this. I'm not doing this. And how do they say it in Arizona, Al? You never have to shovel sunshine.
Yes.
Yes. But you better set aside a few extra dollars in your budget for your air conditioning bill, because you're certainly going to need that in the summer.
That's true. I grew up in the heating business, which is pretty funny. We were originally in the heating business only, and then we added on plumbing, air conditioning, and gas heating, and electric as well. So it's plumbing, heating, cooling, electric. And the day they stopped paying me to be cold was the last day I really wanted to be cold.
Yeah. Well, Al, let's kind of start there at the beginning. You've had a very successful career. You're, I certainly wouldn't call it retired, semi-retired. I don't know if you'll ever retire. But how did this start? What's some of your background? Can you share with the listeners some of your story and backstory?
Yeah. So many moons ago, I grew up in a family business. I was third generation. It was started out of my grandfather's gas station in 1936, and my dad and my uncle went into the fuel oil business, which in the Northeast is how you keep homes warm. At least it did. And then if you think of propane, that's kind of what it was like. And then it was recognizing that was going to run out in terms of the business and obviously be replaced. But it was also a case of we didn't want to get locked out of our own basement. So in other words, our customers were loyal to us. But if we didn't do these other services, we were going to get locked out of our own thing. So what we first had to do was systematize our business. So it was me, my two older brothers, and my dad. When I came home from school, I had an engineering degree. Don't hate me. I never practiced one day. I came home to the job I had when I left, but I did have a nice diploma, to which my dad gave me a toolbox and sent me off into the field to learn how to do stuff. And so, but I grew up, as most kids in a family business. By the time you're 8, I was soldering, cleaning off fittings and cleaning toilets and being a helper. That's just the nature of it. And we would have insane conversations at our dinner table, listen to the sports, talk about a job, listen to the sports, talk about a job. It was kind of this, when you're around this family group, that was the way that it worked in terms of dynamics. So we were in the, if you know where JFK Airport is in New York City, we didn't go into Manhattan, which is everybody thinks is New York City, but Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, Suffolk. It was long and it was a lot of traffic. We had one main hub shop and we had a couple of spokes because of the drive time. And here's what I'm going to say for you guys to stay tuned is if you're ever entertaining that you're going to open up in different places, here's the bad news. Most of you couldn't go across the street and operate the business the same way because you're so integral to everything. I was telling this with another podcast host, and they began to laugh when I said this. I go, what's so funny? He goes, Al, we outgrew our shop. So we bought the building next door without the connecting wall, and we acted like we were on two sides of the globe. And he said, that's why I'm so passionate about systems. And the reason I'm passionate about systems is when I arrived really and got paid when I got off from college, it was chaos. And the theory was, well, we've lasted all these years already, is just get busy and the money will follow, which in our case was lucky. It always did. That said, it was a very, very stressful process. So there's no mistaking why I say less stress and more success, which has been my second career. For the last 20 years, I've been out traveling this country and Canada. And I was sharing all of these systems with other contractors. And I was saying to Austin before this call is it wasn't just in plumbing, heating, cooling, electric. I worked with commercial roofers. I worked with kitchen cabinetry people. I worked with a garage door manufacturer here in Arizona, but also throughout the country.
Photography, were saying
photography.
Before,
I actually worked with a photographer who had to talk me into the job. And these systems and taking control of it, a lot of what Austin knows from the book, The 7-Power Contractor, that is the core of everything that we had to do to bring our business under control in the 1990s, in the mid 1990s. Now, I had gone off, fortunately, my good friends who were in the industry, talking about industry publication, not just working in the industry we're in, said, I have to get out into a bigger pool. I can't just stay in this little pool. And so I joined an organization, and it's kind of funny now, which was before that, the only trade association we belonged to, the dues were $150 a year. So I found out about this great organization, which was a forerunner to Nexstar, which is very big in plumbing, heating, cooling, electric. And the best of the shops were coming together to do this thing. And at the time, it was $4,000. So I went into we sat in a very small office, by the way. The reason was my dad felt that we don't make any money with all of you sitting here. Go out. And so I said, I need $4,000 to join this organization. And you would have thought that I asked for their firstborn, right? And I said, if we're going to exist beyond where we are, I have to go. And if you don't want to pay for it, I'll pay for it myself. To which they said, okay, take the money. But it was really important to get out and see it from a different way, because just like you and I had talked about as well, which is Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, was very instrumental. And that was where I first came to know that, which was really about if you're always working in the business and never on it, nothing was going to change. Now, that gave me, though, why it really important. It told me what I needed, but didn't really give me much in the how. But the good news is I'm really good at how. And so that set us on the course of systematizing our business. And the big thing was we had tried for years to write SOPs or operating manuals, as I call it, and really with no success. And I have always tell the story, which is much funnier now, but not then, I was 25 years old. We were a New York City union shop, by the way. So there was a employer-employee manual, a couple hundred pages. There's an employee case. We're having an issue, employer-employer. Go to court, and the judge looks at the book, looks at me, and he goes, "This is not in plain English. And are you running meetings on this?" And I go, "No." He goes, "Case dismissed." And I was very crushed, but I learned very valuable lessons at an early age. If it's not in plain English, and if it's not in the meetings and not in the culture, it isn't worth, in that time, the paper was written on. And today in the digital space, because everything is obviously distributed digitally, but this is one of those core concepts, which is what I call operating power.
Thank you so much. And I certainly want to get a little later in the show into some of the plain language. We were talking before about how your book is written, and in fact, advice or counsel that you gave, your editor. Every single word in the book is yours, but that you wanted it to be in plain English at a certain reading level so that it could be very comprehensible. There's not large words in it to be able to confuse people. And I would imagine the best policies are probably written that way too. And before we go into that, what was there something, Al, for you? You've been in the business since you're 8. You really got into the business after you came back from college, like you said, and started to get paid. But was there something? Did you recognize from a young age that there was a better way to do things? Was there something that happened before this experience that you had when you were 25 and you went to court, and what caused you to how did that work?
Well, people who meet me and paid for me to come out and do the consulting and the rest of it just assumed that I was born organized and systematic, which was far from the truth. As a matter of fact, when I was going through junior high school and high school, junior high school for some is middle school, I was a mess. I had trouble getting started with stuff. The good news is my stepmom that raised me, because my mom died early, she was a former teacher, and she goes, "You cannot go to college with these habits." And she took me and explained about, how to get organized, how to work on stuff, how to start with something easy, build confidence, and move on. And that really was beginning of the platform. When I got to college, I partied at night, but I made it to the library. And so, it's a case of I learned some really good habits and about what being systematic and disciplined could do. And when I returned to the business, I could see the chaos. And yes, I was in it for a while before I ever took on the bear, if you will.
So
and it was,
keep going.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, then that was really, fortunately for me, I had really great friends. They kind of, took me under their wing. That's why I still offer free 30-minute phone calls to anybody who's a contractor. And the reason I do is I never forget that I am where I am because of the mentors that came in my life. My dad was a very big mentor. And I was lucky to have a dad who actually would ask his sons for opinions and voice his opinion in front of us, and gave us a lot of, rein to do things. And if you're a dad with a son or daughter coming into the business, I encourage you to do the same. But, it really was a big, big thing for me to have these mentors come into my life. And what I usually say at this point is, take a look, if you're watching on the screen, is if not for those mentors, I'd be in a basement late at night turning pipe wrenches, and that would be a very bad thing. So I don't forget.
What were some of those discussions like growing up in a family business? I'm totally unaware. I didn't grow up in a family business. I kind of chose to, or maybe chose isn't the right word, but kind of fell into this during college, and it's been fantastic. But what are some of the pitfall? What's great about being part of a family business? What's not so great about being part of a family business?
And I've written a lot about this. And matter of fact, like you were saying, on my website, there's a lot of great information that's free in the blogs. Go searching there, you'll see a lot of stuff. I've been writing for 20 plus years right now. The biggest thing that I would say is the plus is that when I would go on vacation and my 2 brothers and my dad were there, I never spent 1 second worrying about the business or what was going on or what was going behind my back. And they felt that, we were same common core, if you will. What was bad is, especially when we were young, my brothers and I spent most of the time micromanaging each other. And so, and basically butting heads. And to my father's credit, he grew up on a farm. And the joke of it is it was a farm in Brooklyn. That's how many years ago it was. But his said to us, he said, boys, you know what I've been thinking? He says, if we all get on the same side of the car and push, we're going to go a lot further. And he walks out, and myself and my two brothers are looking at each other and going, what? Oh, we have to figure this out. And so that was kind of, the getting together. And that was actually one of the things that caused us to get the org chart together. Because before we had an org chart, we would all do each other's job. So for instance, insurance was always big because we had a ton of vehicles. And so we would go out and get, my brother Marty would get bids, Richie would get bids, and I would go get bids. And when we finally defined the boxes and what goes on in the boxes, it was clear it was Marty's job to go get those bids and then make a presentation to myself and Richie. And you could see how this becomes more efficient and much better. And that's just a small example of the power of the right box org chart, and the one that I've been using for years with companies that are as small as 5 people and $1 million in sales to a company that's 85 million in sales.
How about that? Al, let me ask you this. I mean, throughout someone's career and the life of their business, there's normally turning points or, pivotal moments. Sometimes those are really great and really exciting. Sometimes they're not at all. But, in my limited experience so far, it seems like a lot of those things that may appear like setbacks are really just launching pads for the next thing. Did you have anything throughout your career in the family business that were turning points for you or really big positive pivots?
Yeah, there were a series of them, but I'll give you just a very painful vignette because somebody was asking about doing a show on all the disastrous things that went on. And I said, well, at our old shop, we had a backup generator. So if power went down, we could still operate because we took it serious that we were 24/7, 365. And that is the nature of it because we also did residential, commercial, and industrial, not just residents. And so I watched them put on the backup generator. And one day the person who normally do it wasn't in and the power went off. So I just walked over and flipped the switch. The power came back on and I thought, oh, that's good. That is until the utility men come into our office screaming and wanting to kill the person who sent electricity back up the line. I had no idea. And of course, I to this day, when I tell the story, it's just frightening. But what it did do was it was the first time we ever, after that, I made a list. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, before you go flipping that switch. And that's just a small thing. When you don't have anything in writing, everyone at your company is free to do anything they want, and you have to take it.
That's terrifying.
Yes. I hope so.
Yeah,
it is. And, when we finally committed $150,000 in today's money back in the 90s, we had always tried to write these manuals. We never could, not just because we didn't have time, but it came out like a law book. Article 1-.367 says, or else it came out, we were yelling at you. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Well, if you're raised by authoritative parents, after a while, you don't even hear no anymore. And so that's why it's so critical. It's not the words on the digital device. It's what you put in, what's the tone, what you leave out. There's a lot of things that you need to know. And this is really where the journey began. So we spent $150,000. We hired my friend who was an industry writer to run all these meetings where a lot of the costs came in. But we began to understand that, me as a tech is affected by how good the CSR, customer service rep, built the sales momentum or destroyed it in the way they handled the call. How well did they handle it off to the dispatcher? And even if it's the same person, when they hang up the phone, magically they have to have a whole different set of skill sets for to be a good dispatcher. So it's what I call the triangle of communication. CSR, happy hostess in a restaurant, capture all the information, explains how we do business, let them know that life will be great when the great tech comes. Then they hand it off to the dispatcher working with the service manager, maximizing the bill hours during the course of the day, getting the right people. And what I love was one of my customers very early on said to me, Al, what about the awful truth at 2 p.m.? I go, what's the awful truth at 2 p.m.? He goes, who's got to love me? Who's got to like me? Not so much. What are you going to do about it right now? And that was brilliant. So, of course, we addressed that, but that is the nature of it. So the dispatcher gets all that information out to the tech, which, of course, is easier with software. But don't believe just because you have great software, everything's going to work automatically. Not true. They get all the information out to the tech. The tech needs to know what they need to know other than the work they do. In this case, pest control, my case, plumbing, heating, cooling, electric. There's lots of guys in my program that are painters, power washers, all different trades, landscapers. So it's not the trade manual for those because I don't have, other than power washer, that trade manual. They know this is where they're broken and need to get fixed. And all the other kinds of manuals that it takes to fill those boxes. So the box org chart is like a bingo board. And then your goal is, can you cover each square with its own manual? Not for the 100%, not the weird 20, not the perfection that you like to have. It's really about how can I occupy that box in an objective way rather than subjective, which is for all of you out there, you want me to read your mind and use your common sense. And that's not going to happen.
And how do they say it? Common sense isn't so common.
I like that.
Let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this then. So your specific background is in heating and cooling. A lot of these principles that you've discussed or that you've written manuals for and consulted for, they are duplicatable and replicatable over any industry, including photography, which,
yes.
As we were talking before, you thought.
Yeah, and commercial roofing and kitchen cabinetry and garage doors. Yeah, so yes, exactly.
You name it. When you either are taking on a new client or onboarding a new client, or when you look at a company across the street, what are the couple of things that you just know without even talking to them that you can provide counsel or recommendation on because you've just done this so many times? Where are people going wrong and where can they start?
Yeah, well, I would say when I was doing one-to-one consulting, and we have a mutual friend, Tommy Mello, home service expert, but he's also the A1 garage door. And December 29th, 2019, I had finished working with him and a great electrical company that had 10 or 12 shops in Alabama and Tennessee. And I had already been in this thing for almost 19 years. And this was my second career. And I said, well, this was fun, but I'm never going to have two better clients than these two. Plus, I really believe Tommy burnt me out. And I still have lots of energy. And obviously, by the way, I'm kidding because Tommy and we talk constantly and I'm still involved. But I put my product online, which is the operating manuals, back in 2016. And now it's, that's why people in Australia and New Zealand are using these same manuals. It's very simple for them to follow along. The thing for me, though, is when I was doing one-to-one, I always started, and it mirrors the book, I always started with planning power. Because here's what I know from you listening to this podcast. And Austin and I are brilliant, so we're hoping you're taking notes as you go. But the reality is, do you need one more good idea, my friends? Or do you need one idea implemented? Because I'm betting it's the second scenario. But every time you go to Facebook, in the industry room I'm talking about, every time you listen to a podcast, every time you read a good book like mine or Michael Gerber's or any of the other great business books, there are no shortage of great business books out there. It's easy to spawn another great idea, and your team is destroyed when you do. When you go off to a webinar or a seminar or whatever. And so you need a way to handle that. And that is what I call planning power. So planning power, which I always describe as all your great ideas need to go to the top of the funnel, which is what I call the master project list. That's where they rest. Think of it as airplanes waiting on it, to take off. And then you have to filter it down by either fixing biggest problem or challenge or greatest chance to grow and be profitable. That gets you to your top 30. And that is what you would do in 1 year. No one, and I've worked with the biggest companies, should be working on 30 things at one time. It's just insane. Then you boil it down with the same filter, figure biggest problem, challenge, greatest chance to grow and be profitable, get it down to your top 5. And then no matter how small you are today, whether you're 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, you need to be working a part of your week on those top 5 to make them come to reality because you picked them, not me. You picked them because you said that would happen, fix the biggest problem, challenge, the greatest chance to grow and be profitable. So that is where I always start. When I walk into a shop, though, in particular in plumbing, heating, cooling, electric, but it's also I've been the roofing companies and the rest of it. Normally they are 50% overstocked. Now, not talking about coronavirus, and I'm not talking about the supply chain. Take that out off the table for a second before this happened. But that was usually the case. And the reason is, well, we should have that. And what happens is it either gets lost, stole, damaged, or it's out of sync with what you do. And in the case of the pest control, you store, chemicals. They can't be stored forever. And they do change which chemicals can and can't be used and, things of that nature. So, and then also caging it off. So that's one of the things that seems to be universal is taking control of the warehouse space in a way that makes sense, limiting access so people can't go in because do you have 60 gallons of this stuff or do you have no gallons of this stuff to use a pest control thing? That's really an issue. That's one big thing. The other thing is I find in these things is in companies that have grown, they tend to go upstairs and create the second story in their building. And they violate one of the biggest things that is built into us is there's the ivory tower on that second floor. They get disconnected from their own business. I worked with a great condo company in Montreal. They were 85 million in sales. And they had nothing but vice presidents. And so he sent me the org chart.
Vice president.
Yes, he sent me an org chart and it was just loaded. Well, the bad news is his business was shrinking. This was, 2008, 9, 10, something like that. And I looked at these pages and I just told him, I said, if you expect me to work with all these vice presidents, this is not going to happen. You're going to have to be involved. And so I show up the first day and I'm in his office in downtown Montreal. And he says, I have a surprise for you. I go, what's the surprise? He goes, I fired most of those vice presidents. He goes, you want to know what I found? He said, you found that they were lying to you. He goes, yeah, how'd you know that? I go, because their only job was to keep their job, not to help you. And so by telling you that's you were cut off your own business, but I blame you, not them. And you didn't have an org chart that really helped this situation. So we fortunately, it was a 15-foot whiteboard and we created an org chart, but it's very similar to that. And all we did was break down all these ongoing jobs that they have and site protection and the rest of it, but it was very flat. That's my point of this whole discussion. So where you sit in a building, and I've done a ton of building redesigns because I had to do it at my own company. I was saddled with what my dad had bought. I knew the evils of a second story. We store junk and sheds outside. And so we moved to a really good place that my brother and I had found to be in the right place to go to where we wanted to go, to be our main hub. Now, we had spoke satellites because New York traffic is as bad as you can imagine, with the exception of California, I guess. But the reality is that, drive time was a killer. So we had field supervisors go out because that's how you run it, but you need systems. The point about this was really where you sit in the building is dictated by the org chart. And when people redesign their building to fit the org chart, communication goes way up. And guess what? Money comes with it.
That's fascinating. I either missed that in the book or just didn't realize that. What would you say? And let's talk about the org chart a little bit more. I mean, what would you say? I don't know. You probably got statistics and maybe even case studies, but a company that doesn't have an org chart today that implements one tomorrow and sticks with it. I mean, what their business is like already without it.
Yep.
What would you expect? You say profits, money, clear lines of sight and communication. What other benefits could a company expect by implementing something like that, even if it's just a 3-person, 5-person company?
Yeah. The thing is, I usually get resistance from small companies. The greatest. Well, it's just me, my wife, and 3 other people. I go, yeah, guess what? You're filling all these boxes today. You just didn't know it. I did you a giant favor by letting you know what the boxes are. And then if you have the manuals to cover the boxes, you can fill it. And then you can earn the right to get somebody else in and train that box so that they can do it. And you move down to the second thing behind the box org chart, which is a depth chart, DEPTH. which is if you play football or any sport, the first person who snaps the ball gets hurt. We don't stop snapping the ball. There's a second string, third string. Same thing goes at your company. And the goal was, in my case, was I didn't want to be the first person to run the big ticket sales, but I didn't stop running them till the end. I wasn't the first person to go grab my toolbox with 25 guys, but I certainly could do it. And I did that to the end as well, just to stay sharp. And the CSRs can back up the dispatcher, and the dispatcher can back up the CSR if this is all set up with the proper training. But until you have the boxes, until you have a manual that tells what goes on in those boxes, all of this is much more difficult, if not near impossible.
So let's talk about skill and training and education. You spoke briefly about almost giving your father and brothers a heart attack by asking for $4,000 to go. I mean, where, and maybe that was, so you invested in yourself with the traditional education, college. You at least went to one seminar that I'm aware of that cost $4,000. What things have you done along the way? And what is your take on either seminars or education? What have you done to be able to stay relevant and lead your own organization and others' organizations?
Yeah, no, I think, for my own business, and, credit to my dad and uncle for getting it to the point that my brothers and I can show up, and credit to my dad, because my uncle had passed, my dad, for allowing us to take and move this business where it needed to go. And that was taking on other trades, and, because we wouldn't get locked out of our own business, and adding that on. And without, again, an org chart, without systems and manuals for going into different trades, and then building a hands-on training center that goes with it, which is a lot of the training that we did. I was lucky. I had some very good mentors all along the way. That really changed my life in terms of, even at the beginning, be aware when I was young, my job was to hold the flashlight from my dad and my brother Richie, who had the hands of gold. But when I got home from college, I was really dependent on going out and doing my own calls. And fortunately, my dad paired me up with a really great, patient, older gentleman. And I worked under him. And as we were working, he's showing me stuff. And I go, could you do it this way? He goes, yep, you could. And we keep doing this. Could you do it this way? He goes, yep, you could. Finally, he puts down the toolbox after a number of these calls and looks at me and goes, Al, you're very smart. I said, thank you, Middle. And he goes, but you're also lazy. I said, because otherwise you would just do it my way. And I am not lazy, but I will tell you that if you're not thinking of a better way, then nothing's going to change. And so, if I've also learned the power of delegating. It wasn't like I went to a course to get it, but, I was lucky enough. My father was a very big believer in education. He felt no education was wasted, because when I came home with my engineering degree, now, by the way, when I was in school, I was still working in the business 6 months a year. It wasn't like, I was on vacation or spring break. There was none of that. So for me, the big thing was I was able to go to some good business training, American Management Association training and things of that nature. And the course at $4,000 was actually a group association where they had super meetings and things of that nature. So there was a lot of resources for the time. And they're still around today and still doing good, but they focus strictly on plumbing, heating, cooling, electric. These were some of the things that really began to form my stuff, but it really was, we were serial entrepreneurs. And that's what I was sharing before, which was my dad had myself and my two older brothers in meetings as teenagers. We were allowed to attend, but not to talk, because my father would say he would answer questions, which he would after the meeting. But we were in multi-state real estate. We had a chain of liquor stores. We had an ice cream shop. We owned a radiant heat manufacturer, to name just a few of the businesses. And so we understood about, how businesses run. But it was really, as I continued to move on, and I realized that there's got to be, I like to think of it as a foundation. So what I always share is in the plumbing business, if I came to your house, Austin, you want to have a beautiful master bathroom upstairs on the top floor, which we don't have a lot out here in Arizona because of the heat, but think wherever you are. The point is, you want to take me upstairs. And I go, no, I have to go down to where the basement is, which we also don't have down here. But the reason is I can't do what you want up there until I do what's down in the basement to make sure it can support it. So there's only two types of companies I've ever worked with when I was doing this, which was either a fast grower like Tommy, but every time the phone rang, it was, how do we solve this problem? So it was gasoline to a fire. Or a small company where you can't clone yourself. And now you know there's only so many hours in a day, days in a week, weeks in a month. And now you need systems to be able, so they both need the same foundation, which starts with the box org chart, which becomes the depth chart. And then you need to cover with the squares. And that's one of those key 7 building blocks in your foundation.
Incredible. Which client did you prefer working with more? The gasoline on fire like Tommy's, or the ones that, kind of max themselves out?
Honestly, I was really good with both. I had some problems sometimes with clients that had grown pretty big because they wanted me to, well, look at this. And I go, well, I was that at my own company. We were 17, 18 million, but I would have been a young dead person if I didn't change things. Do you want that? And so, that's part of the problem. People have asked me a different question, Austin. Who are your best clients? And I go, well, you would think it's the brightest people, but it's not necessarily so. And this was also my co-consultant, Ellen Rohr, because she handled the financial of the 7 powers and we worked together on the sales coaching.
Ellen's fantastic. I love her stuff.
Yeah, she's got great stuff. And if you ever, by the way, anybody listening, Where Did the Money Go is a must read. I read it every year over and over because I keep picking stuff up from it. It really did change. And then the second book in sequence is How Much Should I Charge? That is not going to go to Amazon or wherever, she sells it. But the point of this was, when you're doing this together, she and I would have some time in the car and go, well, who do you think our best client is? I go, the people who are not in love with their own stuff so much that they hired us and don't want to use it. Now, I'm okay with you asking why. You are owed that, just like any customer that I ever went to when I was in my own business. And my job is to explain the WIFM, what's in it for me, for you doing this, and who else besides you has done this already. And not most of the time it was me, or I have worked with clients where they've had this success. And I always used to say to everybody, which is even in this program, this online program, you are not my guinea pig on any of this. It's already been tried and true. So the question is, are you going to stay in love with what's not working? Or are you going to come across? And I recognize, by the way, so using another analogy is, you're on this side of the river and you don't like it anymore. So you decide to go across the river and you're halfway through and you're really tired. I get it. You're exhausted. Now you're going to have to fight as hard to get back to where you don't want to be, or you can put the energy in to get to where you said you want to go. Those have been the ones that have been the most successful. And it isn't about, sorry to say, intelligence. It's the ability to know, what am I supposed to work on? Good. What do you want me to do? Good. Let's do that.
Al, what was the transition like from you running your own business to consulting? Is that something that was in the back of your mind that you knew you always wanted to do? Were you traveling around and people were just constantly asking you, hey, Al, how do you do this? What does that look like? Well, what did that transition look like?
Well, it actually started when I was at my business because we finally rebranded we had a bunch of house of brands. We put it all under one brand, got somebody to straighten out, which is another story. But basically, people started calling me up, could you do my rebrand? And I go, no. And so then it was like, when I was developing some of the best text between the manuals, the training curriculum, and the hands-on training center, they go, we'll pay you to train our text. And I said to them, and this was true, which is, even if I could, I can't. And not because we're competitors. The reason is they're in my place. I could take all of my decals off, all my shirt, everything else. They're going to fall in love with me. That's what we call seminar love, in this case, teacher love. And so they're going to want to be with me, not with you. You have to do this at your own place. So that was kind of in the back of my mind. And as I said, I had been there, I don't know, 23, 24 years. My dad came back. He was on vacation. And I sat down with him and I said, I'm going to leave the business in 3 years. I hope all of you heard what I just said. I gave my family 3 years notice. And I said, because I'm going to go off and do consulting. And so he didn't look up from his meal. He just goes, which brother are you fighting with? I I said, well, here's the good news. I'm not fighting with either of them. This is just something I know that I'm called to do. This was my mission at the time. And so I did 3 years. But what was great about those 3 years is I was intent on making sure my brothers and my dad were in great position when I left. Plus, I didn't want to be dragged back in. So I used those 3 years. We did a lot of acquisition, which is what you're talking about. We are giant fans of acquisition. My dad and my uncle, our service area was taken over, and it was welfare and everything else. The area went downhill. And if not for their learning about acquisition and doing it, there would have been no business by the time my brothers and I showed up. And my brothers and I continued that, both in adding to our business and also adding new trades to our business. So that's how we went into the plumbing, heating, cooling, electrical businesses to add on to what we were doing before. So this is really kind of where the whole story gelled together. And so I spent those 3 years also doing that and bringing in great people, but training them on the systems I already had and explaining where they fit on the org chart.
Well, I'm glad you brought up acquisitions. I didn't know that was something that you had done or had experience in. We have found a tremendous amount of success the last several years doing that, and it is a competency. It is difficult. It takes some time, and I think that everyone, at least that we do, we're learning. I guess I have a couple of questions now. You've kind of sparked my thinking.
Make a note of it, people. He's still interested in hearing me talk this late in the call. Yeah, that's great. You go for it, Austin.
We'll round it out in this part, next couple, few minutes. But when you guys would look to do acquisitions, what would you look for? What was important?
So basically what we were looking for was, can we take a competitor out and can we build in that? Can we, some cases, because we looked at it as a spectrum, not one size fits all. There's owner operators. There's no way for them to get out of this business. It's, in my opinion, a life of misery. Now, if you are an owner operator and you love it and you want to do it to the day you die, please, I admire you. It's got nothing to do with it. But the reason why I call it that way is because you work all day, you answer calls, you have to go home at night, catch up on your billing, and who's going to take it on next? So we consolidated a lot of that. Sometimes it was a case because we wanted them to come in, and it was a case where they were bringing a skill set that we either wanted to strengthen for the depth or add a new thing to what we were doing. Because if it's only the people at our company that have new ideas, there's a little bit of inbreeding in there. You have to be careful. Sure. So we would do that when we would be looking into new areas or strengthening. Typically, our sweet spot was 3 to 5 trucks, because the problem, 3 to 5 trucks. And again, if you're a 3 to 5 truck outfit, please don't write me nasty emails or Twitter, because I'm on social media. I'm just giving you a rule of thumb, not an absolute. But the problem with that is, if one of your 3 trucks goes down, they get sick, die, quit, hurt, a third of your sales is gone. Plus, you can no longer easily operate out of your house. You have all the costs of being in business without all the profit it takes. So until you get to about 7 trucks, it's the problem. And because that will cover pretty much, if you do it right. There's a lot more to this because we're wrapping up. But the idea is, in our case also, because we were 24/7, 365, you will burn out 3 guys trying to handle all those shifts. It's just the nature of it. So that was why the size is it. And we did buy, if we were going to an area that was like an hour away and then coming back because we didn't have calls and going back and back and back, we would look to acquire a company and call it a beachhead with a nucleus of calls, train people, and then do our marketing around that. And we would, whenever possible, work 2 ends to the middle.
What's the biggest lesson you learned in doing acquisitions? And another way to ask that would perhaps be, what's the worst deal you ever did, or what was the biggest learning experience in doing
I would
deals?
say a couple of things, because I've counseled so many people, and of course I have an acquisition manual. If anybody knows me, that's not a surprise that I have a manual. But the rule of thumb we always used, again, a rule of thumb, is we looked at 10 to close 1 really good one. If you are going to be so attached to one person, it's kind of like when you were dating. Please go out with me. Please go out with me. Please go out. No, it's the best way to have a date is to already have a date. So the same thing goes. You have to be talking to a couple of people. and see where they fit along that spectrum. And it really begins with a lunch conversation, things of that nature. There's a whole long process to it. We did some better than others. Here's one that I actually, when we jumped into plumbing, heating, cool, electric, I bought my friend's business and he stayed on. His guys were young. And I thought, well, they're already in the same organization that we were in, this Nexstar. And so it's not going to be that hard. And there were 4 guys and they were young. And I figured, well, for sure they were going to work out. No, did not. They had drug problems. They were really not the same cultural mix and some other things that, was a problem. Now, the head guy was really good and important, but there was nobody there. And my company, who had grown up on training, said, let us do it. And so that's what we cross-trained them outside. It became really great. Here's another thing is we did audit because it was a good sized company. You don't have to do this all the time, but we did a 3-year audit of their, sales and earnings and making sure there wasn't an immediate boost just before the sale. And again, it was a friend. The sales fell short. So what happened was the guy had way more inventory. We liquidated his inventory and it pretty much covered anything that we had not covered in the first year. So when I do acquisition, I usually look with a 3-year to 5-year horizon. 3 years, I want to be at least breaking even. And 5 years, I want to be making money. Now, if I beat that, congratulations.
Even better. Al, as we round this out, any last words of wisdom, any other thoughts for those that are listening? I want to have you have the last word.
Thank you. I do recommend, if you've not read my book, The 7 Power Contractor, you can go to.
I got it here.
You can go to Amazon and buy it. It was written to be a 2 to 4 hour reader. That's really what it is. And you can get it in ebook, or if you love the tones that you're hearing, this velvet voice, you can get it on Audible. Now, Audible is really good because especially if you're stuck in a truck, it's a great way to do it. I believe most people who buy the Audible then go on to buy the paperback because they want a yellow highlight stuff. And the reason I'm saying that is not because I need the $29 for the book, although Amazon takes a lot of that, and the $5 for Audible. It's for you. I think it's going to answer a lot of things about how can I start to take control of my business. That was why I wrote the book. And I had a great editor help me make sure that this came through this way. That's a great place to start. If you're looking to put systems in your business, on my website, there's under products, you'll see there's a place to click out. I have everything for a lot of trades, not for the pest trade, but that doesn't matter. There's, again, pest landscapers and are in this same program because they want the org charts. They want to understand all these things. They want to understand the way easier to be an editor than a creator. That would be my second thing if that's something that you're looking for. But yeah, the good place to start is the book.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. I should have put more plugs in for it. But one of the things that I think that I bought this about 1.5 years ago, and we were speaking earlier just about plain language and the fact that you did want someone to be able to, in a couple of lunch breaks or whatever else, be able to read this in 2 to 4 hours. It is an easy read. And there's applicable things that you can take that very day to implement to improve your position or business or responsibilities that you might have. I've purchased a few of these and passed them out, not just to employees, but just others and acquaintances because it's helpful, it's valuable.
Thank you for helping me in Amazon. We appreciate it.
Yeah, because Jeff Bezos needs it.
Jeff Bezos needs the money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, very good. Al, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having you on and for the things that you've shared with me and the audience. It's been fantastic to spend the last 45 minutes, hour getting to know you and for everything that you've shared. Thank you.
Thanks for the chance. I appreciate it.
Of course. And thank everyone else for tuning in. Tune in every Thursday. We'll drop these once a week. Really appreciate you. Create a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Multiply You podcast. You'll see us again soon when you subscribe for future episodes.